My brother laughed. We already registered my business at your new cabin. Mom and Dad are taking the master bedroom. When I locked them out and called the sheriff, they cried, "Selfish." But they didn't know we had already found the business they registered using my address. Hey everyone, welcome back to Van's Rock Stories. Some families believe love means sharing everything. Others believe love means respecting boundaries. So let me ask you this. What would you do if your own family announced they were moving into the house you bought without ever asking for permission? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below. And if you enjoy stories about family drama, tough choices, and people finally standing up for themselves, don't forget to subscribe. Now let me tell you what happened. My name is Natalie Parker. I'm 35 years old, and the day I moved into my cabin in the Colorado mountains felt like I could finally breathe again. 3 weeks earlier, I'd resigned from my job as a marketing director after more than 12 years of chasing deadlines, leading meetings, and answering emails at hours no one should be working. My friends thought I was having a midlife crisis. I wasn't. I was simply exhausted. The cabin wasn't a vacation home or an impulse purchase. I'd spent years saving for it. Every mortgage payment would come from money I'd earned myself, and for the first time, every decision about that place would be mine. At least, that's what I believed. Most of my furniture was still sitting inside unopened boxes that first evening. I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich, found a folding chair, and ate dinner while looking out the giant windows toward the pine trees. It wasn't glamorous. Actually, it looked like someone had just moved in that afternoon, because they had. But I couldn't stop smiling. There were no ringing office phones, no client presentations waiting for Monday morning, no one knocking on my apartment door because they needed another favor. For years, someone in my family always had a financial emergency. Dad needed help catching up on property taxes. My younger brother needed money after his restaurant closed. Mom had unexpected medical expenses. Every time I thought about doing something for myself, another crisis showed up first. I always convinced myself I'd buy my dream home later. Later turned into 12 years, so sitting alone in that unfinished living room didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. I carried my coffee onto the back deck just as the sun started disappearing behind the mountains. The air smelled like pine, and the only sound was the wind moving through the trees. Then my phone rang. Evan, my older brother. I stared at the screen for a second. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. "Hey." "So," he said, sounding unusually cheerful. "You made it." "I did." "You like the place?" "I love it." He chuckled. "Good. That'll make tomorrow easier." I frowned. "What happens tomorrow?" "Dad wanted me to call before everyone heads up." "Heads up where?" "To your cabin." I laughed once. I honestly thought he was joking. "My cabin?" "Our cabin," he corrected without missing a beat. The smile disappeared from my face. He continued talking like he'd been reading from a family meeting agenda. "Mom and Dad are taking the master bedroom since it's on the main floor." I looked around my empty living room. No, I had definitely heard him correctly. "I'll use your office for my agency," he continued. "Quiet location, great internet. It'll be perfect for meeting clients." "And where exactly am I supposed to live?" I asked. "Oh, you'll be fine upstairs." "In the guest room?" "Yeah, at least until you figure out where you're actually going to live." I tightened my grip on my phone. "Evan, you know I bought this place." "Of course. With my money." "I know." "Then why are you talking like somebody else gets to decide who lives here?" He sighed, almost like I was being difficult. "Because Dad already did." No anger, no hesitation, just complete confidence that our father's decision settled the conversation. I stared through the window at the mountains I'd been admiring only minutes earlier. The cabin suddenly didn't feel nearly as peaceful. Finally, I asked, "What time are you all getting here?" "Around 9, We've got 2 SUVs and a moving truck, so it'll take a while. A moving truck. Not luggage, not a weekend visit. A moving truck. See you tomorrow, Nat. The call ended. I lowered my phone and sat there in complete silence. The strangest part wasn't what Evan had said. It was realizing they had never once asked if they were welcome. And somehow, I wasn't surprised by that at all. I stayed in that chair for another minute, staring at my phone. A moving truck. Evan hadn't misspoken. He hadn't exaggerated. He genuinely believed they were moving into my house. Instead of calling him back, I stood up and walked through the cabin room by room. The master bedroom. The guest room. The small office overlooking the trees. Just an hour earlier, I'd been imagining where I'd put my bookshelves and whether I wanted a bigger desk by the window. Now I found myself wondering if I'd even be allowed to enjoy any of it if I didn't act immediately. I grabbed my laptop and searched for a local locksmith. Luckily, one company offered emergency service. The technician answered on the second ring. Mountain Lock and Security. Hi, I said. I just moved into a new property and I need every exterior lock rekeyed tonight. Everything? Everything? He paused for a second. Is there a security issue? I looked around the quiet cabin. Not yet. An hour later, a pickup truck pulled into the driveway. The technician, a man named Chris, spent almost 2 hours replacing every lock cylinder and installing a new digital keypad on the front door. While he worked, he asked the question everyone asks when they see moving boxes. Starting fresh? I smiled. That's the plan. He nodded. Best time to upgrade security is before anybody else has access. I almost laughed at how perfectly timed that sentence was. Before leaving, Chris handed me 2 new key cards and helped me set a 6-digit access code. No copies of the old keys will work anymore, he said. Good. He probably thought I was being overly cautious. Maybe I thought so too. Until I remembered something. When I was 16, I came home from school and found my bedroom door missing. Not the lock. The entire door. Dad had taken it off the hinges. I remember standing there with my backpack still on. What happened? You don't need privacy, he said without even looking up from the television. I didn't do anything. You slammed your door yesterday. So? So doors are a privilege. Mom didn't argue. She simply walked into my room later that evening to put away laundry like nothing had happened. For almost 3 weeks, I slept in a room everyone could see into. Dad called it teaching respect. I called it humiliation. Looking back, that wasn't even the only time my privacy disappeared. Mom used to read my journal because she said parents shouldn't have secrets from their children. She checked my emails when I was in college because she was just making sure I was safe. Even after I moved into my first apartment, Dad still expected me to give him a spare key. At the time, I kept telling myself that's just how my family showed they cared. Standing in my own cabin, holding a brand new key card, I realized something uncomfortable. Maybe it had never been about caring. Maybe they'd simply never believed I was allowed to have boundaries. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Evan. It was the security company confirming the installation of 2 outdoor cameras I'd requested online. They had an opening the following morning. I accepted it immediately. Before I closed the app, another thought crossed my mind. If my family really showed up tomorrow, I didn't want this turning into an argument about hurt feelings. I wanted everything documented, so I called the county sheriff's office. The dispatcher listened patiently while I explained that I had just purchased the property and that relatives might attempt to enter without permission. She didn't sound surprised. "We'll make a note of it," she said. "If anyone refuses to leave after being told they're not welcome, call us. Hopefully it won't come to that. I hope not either." The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. Simple, professional, nothing dramatic. For the first time since Evan's call, I felt like I had actually done something instead of just worrying. I made another cup of coffee, sat back down by the window, and watched the sky grow darker over the mountains. My phone lit up one more time. A text from Evan. Only 5 words. Dad says don't make this difficult. I stared at Evan's text for a long moment. Dad says don't make this difficult. That was it. No. Can we talk? No. Is it okay if we stay for a while? Just another reminder that I was expected to cooperate. I typed 3 different replies before deleting every one of them. Finally, I sent the simplest response I could think of. This is my home. If you want to visit, ask first. You're not moving in. The typing bubble appeared almost immediately, then disappeared. A few seconds later, my phone rang. Dad. I let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, Mom called. Then Evan again. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, another text came through. After everything this family has done for you, this is how you're treating us? I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because I'd heard that sentence in different forms my entire life. When I got promoted, I was reminded that Dad had pushed me to work hard. When I bought my first condo, Mom said none of it would have happened without the values they gave me. Every accomplishment somehow became something the family had earned with me. Never something I had achieved on my own. I kept my reply short. I'm grateful for everything you did raising me. That doesn't make my cabin family property. This time, Evan answered. You're acting like a stranger. Families share. I read that sentence twice. Families share. I agreed with that. But sharing usually involved someone asking first, not showing up with a moving truck. Another message arrived. Mom already started packing. Don't embarrass her tomorrow. That one stung more than I expected. Not because I believed I'd done anything wrong, because I knew exactly what was happening. They weren't trying to solve the disagreement. They were trying to make me feel guilty enough to give in. The conversation wasn't really about the cabin anymore. It was about making sure I stayed in the role I'd always played. The one who kept the peace. The one who sacrificed first. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and made breakfast, hoping a few minutes away from the screen would help. It didn't. By the time my coffee was ready, I'd missed 4 more messages. None of them asked what I wanted. Every one of them told me what I should do. That was when I realized I needed someone who wasn't emotionally involved. Someone who dealt with property disputes for a living. I searched for local real estate attorneys and found a small law office about 30 minutes away. The receptionist answered right away. Ruiz Property Law. My name's Natalie Parker, I said. I think my family is planning to move into my house without my permission. There was a brief pause. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? I did. She transferred me to Carmen Ruiz within a minute. Carmen's voice was calm, almost reassuring. Start from the beginning. So I did. I explained buying the cabin, the phone call, the moving truck, the messages. She barely interrupted, except to ask for dates and names. When I finished, she asked one question. Has anyone besides you signed anything related to the property? No. Good. Then her tone became more direct. Don't argue with them anymore. What? Every emotional conversation helps them. Every written message helps you. I hadn't expected that. Keep every text, she continued. Take screenshots. Save voicemails. Don't delete anything, even if it seems unimportant. So, just stop responding? You can tell them once, in writing, that they don't have permission to occupy the property. After that, don't get pulled into an emotional debate. For the first time since all this started, I felt like someone was giving me actual direction instead of telling me to keep everyone happy. I can do that. Good, Carmen said. Email me copies of everything you've got. I spent the next hour forwarding screenshots, call logs, and photos of my closing documents. A little while later, Carmen called back. I've received everything, she said. I'm also going to check the county's public property and business records. Sometimes those databases tell us things people don't. Do you really think we'll find anything? I don't know, she admitted. But I prefer facts over assumptions. I listened as her keyboard clicked softly through the phone. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then, the typing stopped. Carmen didn't speak for several seconds. When she finally did, her voice sounded very different. Natalie, what is it? I've found something that definitely shouldn't be here. I need you to open your county's business registry, Carmen said. I pulled my laptop closer. It's already open. Good. Search the property address first. I typed in the cabin's address exactly as it appeared on my closing documents. Nothing. For a second, I let out a small breath. Maybe it's nothing, I said. Maybe the database glitched. It happens, Carmen replied. Now search by address history. A different page loaded. This time, one result appeared. Summit Escape Ventures, LLC. I frowned. I've never heard of that. Neither have I, Carmen said. Click it. The filing date caught my attention immediately. It had been registered less than 3 weeks earlier, right around the time I'd finalized the purchase of the cabin. That's weird. Weird isn't illegal, Carmen answered calmly. Let's keep looking. I opened the registration details. The business mailing address matched my cabin exactly. Every number, every letter. There wasn't a typo. It was my address. I blinked twice, honestly expecting another explanation. Maybe someone entered the wrong address by accident. Maybe there was another cabin nearby with a similar number. I bought this place less than a month ago, I said. Could this information have been left over from the previous owner? Carmen was already reading through the filing. I don't think so. Why? Because this company didn't exist before. She paused for another second. And the registered owner isn't the previous homeowner. I swallowed. Who is it? The silence on the phone lasted just long enough to make my stomach tighten. Evan Parker. I stared at the screen. My brother? Yes. I looked at the document again, hoping I'd somehow misread it. I hadn't. His full legal name was right there. There wasn't any doubt. For a moment, I tried convincing myself there had to be an innocent explanation. Maybe he planned to ask me later. Maybe he'd filled out paperwork before talking to me. Maybe he assumed I'd say yes. But another thought quietly pushed its way in. He hadn't mentioned a business during our phone call. He'd only talked about moving in. That suddenly felt less like confidence and more like preparation. Carmen broke the silence. Did you ever authorize him to use your address? No. Did you sign anything allowing a business to operate from your property? Never. Has he ever asked? Not once. All right, she said. Then don't contact him about this. I frowned. You don't think I should ask what he's doing? No. Why not? Because if this is an honest mistake, we'll confirm it with evidence. And if it isn't? Then I'd rather he doesn't know we've already found it. That made sense, as much as I hated admitting it. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my forehead. Just yesterday, I thought this was about my family, assuming they could stay at my cabin. Now, I wasn't sure that had ever been the real issue. Carmen asked me to email her a copy of the business filing while she checked a few additional public databases. While the documents uploaded, I walked into the kitchen to refill my coffee. The cabin was still quiet, peaceful. It almost felt disconnected from the conversation happening through my phone. When I came back, Carmen was still searching. I've got one more idea, she said. What is it? I'm checking whether this company has any online presence. I doubt it. It was just registered. Sometimes people move faster than you'd expect. A few clicks echoed through the speaker. Then, oh, I stopped walking. What? I think you should sit down. I was already sitting. What did you find? I searched the company name. Another pause. And your cabin just appeared. My cabin? Yes. She sounded almost as surprised as I felt. It isn't just listed as an address. I heard another click. There are professional photos of your property. Before I could even process that, Carmen quietly added, "It's on a vacation rental website." I opened the listing with my own hands shaking. For a second, I honestly wondered if someone had stolen photos from the real estate website. Then I recognized the furniture. The dining table wasn't mine. The couch wasn't mine either. Those pictures had been taken before I bought the cabin. But everything else was unmistakable. The stone fireplace, the deck overlooking the mountains, the kitchen windows. Even the view matched exactly. "This is my house," I whispered. "I know," Carmen replied. The listing described it as a luxury mountain retreat available for weekend getaways, executive retreats, and private events. I kept scrolling. There were polished descriptions, professional photos, house rules, check-in instructions marked as "coming soon." This wasn't something someone threw together in an afternoon. Someone had spent time building it. What if they copied these photos from the old listing? I asked. They probably did, Carmen said. That's not what concerns me. What does? The property is accepting reservations. I froze. What? She refreshed the page. The booking calendar isn't empty. I leaned closer to my screen. Several weekends over the next 2 months were already marked unavailable. At first, I thought that meant the dates had simply been blocked. Then Carmen pointed to another section. There. A small note read, "Limited availability due to confirmed bookings." I felt my stomach drop. Does that mean? It usually means someone has already reserved those dates. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My family wasn't just planning to move into my cabin. Someone was trying to turn it into a business before I'd even finished unpacking. Carmen immediately started taking screenshots. Don't close the page. I'm not touching anything. We need copies of every listing, every photo, every description. While she worked, I created my own folder and saved everything I could. The listing included the company name we'd just found, Summit Escape Ventures, LLC. There was no doubt anymore. This wasn't an accident. It was organized. A few minutes later, Carmen found customer reviews weren't active yet, but there was another detail. The platform has a host support number. Should we call? Yes, but don't accuse anyone of fraud yet. A customer service representative answered after a short wait. Carmen introduced herself as my attorney and explained that the property owner had never authorized the listing. The representative became noticeably more serious. "Can you verify ownership?" he asked. "I can," I said. Within minutes, I emailed copies of my closing documents, property deed, and driver's license. "We're opening an internal investigation," the representative explained. "We'll temporarily limit activity on the account while we review ownership." "Has anyone actually booked the property?" I asked. He hesitated. "I'm limited in what I can disclose." "I understand. But I can confirm there are transactions associated with the listing." That was enough. I didn't need exact numbers. Just hearing the word transactions made everything feel real. When the call ended, Carmen looked at me through the video meeting. "You've handled this well." "I don't feel like I have." Most people would have called their brother screaming by now. I almost smiled. "I've definitely thought about it." "I know." She paused before adding quietly, "The less they know, the better." I nodded. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about convincing my family to understand me. I was thinking about protecting myself. My phone buzzed before I could say anything else. A group text. Dad, Mom, Evan, my younger brother. There were 3 photos. The first showed 2 SUVs parked in my parents' driveway. The second showed a rented moving truck with its back door open. The third showed stacks of labeled boxes. Evan's message appeared underneath. Everything's packed. See you around 9 tomorrow morning. Another message followed. Mom's bringing breakfast so we can celebrate your new place together. Celebrate. That wasn't what this was. I looked at Carmen. They're really coming. She gave a slow nod. I believe they are. I picked up my phone, opened my recent call history, and scrolled until I found the number I'd saved earlier that evening. The county sheriff's office. Carmen didn't try to stop me. She simply said, "If they're arriving tomorrow, you shouldn't be standing there alone." I pressed the call button. I barely slept. Every time headlights passed somewhere down the mountain road, I glanced toward the window. By 8:30 that morning, Carmen had already arrived. She parked beside my cabin carrying a slim briefcase instead of the thick stack of folders I'd expected. "You look like you got 2 hours of sleep," she said. "Maybe 3. She smiled sympathetically. "That's still better than none." A few minutes later, 2 sheriff's deputies pulled into the driveway. One of them stepped out and introduced himself. "Morning, Miss Parker. Dispatch filled us in last night. Thank you for coming." "We're just here to keep the peace," he replied. "Hopefully that's all we'll need to do." "I'd like that too." Carmen quietly handed each deputy a copy of my property deed and driver's license. "I figured this would save everyone some time," she said. One deputy nodded appreciatively before slipping the papers into his folder. Everything felt strangely calm. The mountains were quiet. The air was cool. If someone had driven by at that moment, they probably would have thought it was an ordinary morning. Then I heard engines. One SUV, then another. Finally, the moving truck. They came around the bend exactly the way Evan had described. My stomach tightened, but I stayed where I was. The vehicle stopped in front of the cabin. Mom climbed out first. She smiled the second she saw me. "Oh, sweetheart." She opened her arms like she'd come for Thanksgiving dinner. I didn't move. Her smile faded just a little. Dad stepped out next. He looked at the deputies, then at Carmen. His expression changed immediately. "What's all this?" Before I answered, Evan jumped out of the second SUV. He glanced at the sheriff's vehicles and laughed. "You actually called the cops?" "The sheriff," I corrected calmly. "They're here because I asked them to be." He shook his head. "Seriously, Natalie." The back of the moving truck rolled open. My younger brother started lifting boxes as if nothing unusual was happening. One box even had a piece of tape across it labeled, "Master Bedroom." I stared at it for a second. They had packed my parents' belongings into boxes labeled for rooms inside my house. Not once had anyone stopped to ask whether they were welcome. The deputy stepped forward. "Morning, folks." Dad smiled politely. "Morning, officer. Family misunderstanding. We'll be out of your hair in a few minutes." The deputy didn't smile back. "We're here to prevent any misunderstanding." Dad looked slightly annoyed but walked past him toward the front porch anyway. "I'll get the door." He reached into his jacket pocket. My heart sank. He pulled out a key. Not one of the new key cards. The old metal key I'd loaned my parents months earlier when contractors were finishing repairs before closing. He looked almost pleased with himself. "I knew you'd forget to ask for this back." Without saying another word, he slid it into the lock. It didn't turn. He frowned and tried again. Nothing. A little harder this time. Still nothing. He looked over his shoulder. "Natalie." I changed every lock. His eyebrows lifted. "You. What?" I changed every exterior lock the same night I moved in. For the first time all morning, nobody said anything. Even Evan looked caught off guard. Dad slowly removed the useless key and held it in his hand. "You didn't trust your own family?" I met his eyes. "No." The word came out quietly, but it was the clearest answer I'd ever given him. Mom looked genuinely hurt. "Natalie, we're your parents." "I know. We're not strangers." I know that too. Then why are you treating us like this? I took a slow breath. Because none of you asked if you could move in. Evan threw his hands into the air. We're wasting time. He pointed toward the truck. Guys, just start unloading. Neither deputy moved. Instead, one of them spoke firmly. I wouldn't recommend that. Dad's expression hardened. This is still a family matter. It stopped being just a family matter when the property owner told everyone they weren't authorized to enter. Dad looked at me for several long seconds. I couldn't remember the last time I'd stood in front of him without backing down. He seemed to notice it too. His shoulders stiffened. Then, without another word, he walked back to the SUV. He opened the passenger door, reached inside, and pulled out a thick manila folder. Holding it in one hand, he looked directly at me. If that's how you want to do this? He lifted the folder slightly. Then read this. Dad walked toward me and held out the manila folder like he was presenting the final piece of evidence. You should have read the paperwork before embarrassing your own family, he said. I didn't take it. Carmen stepped forward instead. If you don't mind, I'll review it. Dad hesitated for a second, clearly not thrilled that a lawyer was involved. Then he shrugged. Go ahead. It'll save everyone some time. Carmen accepted the folder and opened it on the hood of her car. Everyone instinctively gathered around. The deputies stayed close enough to hear the conversation but didn't interrupt. For a few moments, the only sounds were pages turning and the wind moving through the pine trees. Evan crossed his arms. This is ridiculous. Nobody answered him. He looked at me. You've seriously hired an attorney because your family wanted to stay with you? You weren't planning to stay with me. We're family. You brought a moving truck. He rolled his eyes. So what? Mom and Dad need more space. You have plenty. I didn't respond. He kept talking anyway. You've always had more than the rest of us. One of the deputies glanced at him. Evan noticed and lowered his voice just enough to sound more reasonable. We're trying to build something together. Natalie acts like we're stealing from her. I finally answered. You registered a business at my address without asking. His face barely changed. Instead, he gave a small laugh. It's just paperwork. No. I held his gaze. It isn't. Before he could answer, Carmen spoke for the first time since opening the folder. Mr. Parker. Dad looked over confidently. Yes? Where did this document come from? My attorney helped prepare it. I see. She flipped another page. According to the document, I had supposedly agreed to let my parents occupy the cabin for 7 years. The lease payment was listed as $5 per year. 5. Not 500. 5. It also claimed I'd granted permission for immediate occupancy and shared use of the property. I stared at the signature line. At first glance, it looked like my name, but it wasn't how I signed legal documents. I always wrote my full middle initial. This signature didn't. I never signed this, I said quietly. Dad folded his arms. You don't remember? I remember every closing document I've signed in the last month. Evan let out a frustrated sigh. You're calling Dad a liar now? I'm saying I didn't sign it. The deputies exchanged a quick look. One of them stepped a little closer. We're not making legal determinations here, he said calmly. But we do need to know whether permission to enter this property actually exists. Dad immediately pointed toward the document. There it is. Carmen didn't look convinced. She kept reading. Every page, every line. She wasn't rushing. She circled something with her pen. Then another thing. Her expression slowly changed. What? I asked. Give me a second. She turned to the final page again. The acknowledgement was supposedly notarized. Dad nodded. Exactly. Carmen leaned closer to the seal. Then she pulled out her phone. For almost a minute, nobody spoke. Even Evan stopped talking. The only thing I could hear was Carmen quietly typing. Finally, she looked up. Interesting? Dad frowned. What is? She compared the document with whatever was on her screen, then looked back again. The notary commission number listed here. She tapped the page gently. Doesn't match the state database. Dad's confidence faded just a little. What are you talking about? The commission attached to this seal expired years ago. Evan immediately jumped in. So, maybe it's just a typo. It could be, Carmen replied evenly, but legal documents usually don't contain typos in their notary information. One deputy took a step toward the hood of the car. Ma'am, are you saying this document may not be valid? I'm saying I have serious concerns. Dad's jaw tightened. You're twisting things. No, Carmen answered. I'm reading what's in front of me. She carefully closed the folder before turning toward me. Then, keeping her voice low enough that only I could hear, she leaned in and whispered, I think this document is forged. Carmen didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The words landed harder than if she'd shouted them. Dad's face immediately turned red. That's a serious accusation. It is, Carmen agreed. Which is why I'm not making it lightly. One of the deputies stepped closer. Sir, where did you obtain this document? My attorney prepared it. Can you provide his name? Dad hesitated. I don't have it with me. That tiny pause said more than any argument could. Evan jumped in before anyone else could speak. This is insane, he pointed at me. She's trying to make us look like criminals because she doesn't want to help her own family. I looked at him for a long second. No, Evan. I walked back toward the porch and picked up the accordion folder I'd prepared with Carmen. I spent years helping this family. I opened the first section. These are bank transfers. I handed several copies to the deputies before looking at my parents. You remember when Dad's property taxes were overdue? Mom looked down. I paid them. I turned another page. When Mom needed surgery that insurance wouldn't fully cover, another transfer. I paid that too. Evan folded his arms tighter. So what? You wanted to help. I did. I pulled out another statement. And when your restaurant failed, his expression changed. I covered your car payments for almost a year. You offered. You asked. Silence. I continued flipping through the records. One payment after another. Medical bills, mortgage assistance, emergency repairs, business expenses, vacation deposits that had somehow become family emergencies. I never kept score when I sent the money. Carmen was the one who had totaled everything after reviewing my financial records. She quietly slid a summary sheet onto the hood of the car. For the last 11 years, she said, Ms. Parker contributed just over $83,000 to members of her immediate family. Nobody spoke. Mom blinked several times. I didn't know it was that much. You weren't supposed to, I answered softly. I never wanted anyone keeping track. Evan laughed, but it sounded forced. So now you're sending us an invoice? No. I shook my head. I'm explaining why I'm done being told I owe everyone more. The deputy glanced at the summary sheet before handing it back. This helps establish background, he said carefully. But today's issue is still the property. It is, Carmen replied. And that's where this becomes more concerning. She opened another folder. This morning, we contacted the vacation rental platform. Evan looked at her. So? They confirmed there were financial transactions connected to Summit Escape Ventures. His eyes narrowed. You don't know what those were. We know enough. She placed several printed screenshots beside the business registration, the listing, the calendar, the booking page, the business profile, all using my cabin's address. You registered this company, Carmen said. You advertised this property. And according to the platform, payments were already processed. Evan immediately shook his head. Those were just reservation requests. With deposits? Carmen asked. He didn't answer. She continued. We also preserved copies of the listing before it was restricted. Dad looked confused. What deposits? Evan still said nothing. Mom turned toward him. Evan? He rubbed the back of his neck. I was just testing the website. People don't usually pay deposits for website tests, Carmen replied calmly. The silence that followed felt completely different from the earlier arguments. For the first time all morning, even Dad seemed unsure what his own son had actually been doing. I realized something then. Not everyone in my family necessarily knew the entire plan. Some of them may have simply followed Evan's lead without asking questions. That didn't excuse what they'd done, but it explained the confused look on Mom's face. I reached into my folder one last time. There was still one large sealed envelope inside. Carmen looked at it, then at me. You haven't shown them that yet? I slowly shook my head. No. Dad frowned. What's in the envelope? I held it in both hands but didn't open it. Something I think everyone here needs to see. The driveway fell completely silent. I looked down at the sealed envelope for a moment before opening it. Nobody spoke. Even Evan stopped trying to interrupt. I slid 3 documents onto the hood of Carmen's car. The first was addressed to my parents and both of my brothers. A formal notice revoking any permission to enter my property. Carmen had prepared it the night before. I want to be absolutely clear, I said. From this moment forward, none of you have permission to enter my cabin without my written consent. Dad stared at the letter without touching it. Mom looked like she wanted to say something, but the words never came. I pulled out the second document. This one has already been submitted. Evan frowned. What is it? A report requesting an investigation into the unauthorized business use of my address. His face changed instantly. You actually reported me? You registered a business using my property. It was temporary. It wasn't yours to use. He looked toward the deputies. This is unbelievable. One of them answered calmly. Sir, nobody is deciding guilt here today, but the property owner has the right to file a report. Evan opened his mouth again, then closed it. For the first time all morning, he didn't seem to have another argument ready. I unfolded the final document. This one's personal. Nobody moved. For years, I've been sending monthly financial support. I looked at my parents. I've never complained about it. I looked at Evan. I've never asked for repayment. Then I set the paper down. That ends today. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Natalie. I've already contacted my bank. Dad finally spoke. So you're punishing your own family? No. I shook my head. I'm stopping something I should have stopped a long time ago. Nobody yelled. That surprised me. The anger seemed to drain out of everyone at once. The deputies waited quietly while my family gathered their papers. Dad folded the notice without reading it again. Mom walked back toward the SUV with her head down. Evan stood still for another few seconds before muttering, "You'll regret this." Then he turned and climbed into his vehicle. One by one, the engines started. The moving truck never unloaded a single box. I watched until every vehicle disappeared around the curve in the mountain road. Only then did I realize how exhausted I was. Carmen closed her briefcase. You did well. I don't feel good. You weren't supposed to. She rested a hand on the folder of documents. Healthy boundaries usually don't feel good the first time. The deputies wished us a quiet afternoon before driving away. For the first time since buying the cabin, the driveway was empty again. I thought everything would finally become quiet. Instead, my phone started ringing. An aunt, then another, a cousin. 3 voicemails within 20 minutes. By dinner, my family group chat had exploded. How could you throw your parents out? Your mother is devastated. You called the sheriff on your own father? Someone had clearly shared their version of the story first. I almost ignored every message. Then I remembered something Carmen had told me. Facts don't argue. They simply exist. So instead of defending myself over and over, I wrote one detailed email. I attached the property deed, the screenshots of the business registration, the vacation rental listing, the financial summary, the timeline of everything that had happened. Then I sent the exact same email to every relative who had contacted me. No emotional speech, no insults, just evidence. The replies didn't come immediately. They arrived throughout the evening. Most simply said they hadn't known the full story. Then 2 messages caught my attention. One came from my cousin Megan. Evan asked me last month if I wanted to invest in a mountain rental business. I thought you two owned it together. A few minutes later, my cousin Daniel sent another. He pitched the same thing to me, said the property was already secured and bookings were about to take off. I stared at the screen. So it wasn't just me. He'd been telling the same story to other relatives, maybe even collecting money from them. My inbox refreshed again. This time, it wasn't family. It was the vacation rental platform. The subject line was short. Update regarding your property report. I opened the email. The first sentence made me sit up a little straighter. Our trust and safety team has officially opened an investigation into the business account associated with your property address. The email from the booking platform was only the beginning. By the following afternoon, another notification appeared in my inbox. Your report has been updated. I opened it with Carmen sitting across from me at the kitchen island. She read silently beside me before giving a small nod. They moved faster than I expected. The platform had suspended Summit Escape Ventures from accepting new reservations while they investigated the ownership dispute. Any upcoming bookings were frozen. More importantly, customer payments were being held instead of transferred. I leaned back in my chair. So Evan can't collect anything else? Not through this account? Carmen closed her laptop. But don't assume this is over. She was right. About an hour later, my phone lit up. Evan. I let it ring. He called again. Then he texted. You ruined everything. A minute later, another message appeared. People are demanding refunds because of you. I didn't answer either one. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to fix one of Evan's problems. That felt strange, almost uncomfortable, but it also felt healthy. The following days settled into an uneasy routine. I answered emails from investigators. I forwarded documents. I kept every message my family sent without replying unless Carmen advised me to. Every conversation became evidence. Every screenshot went into another folder. Late one evening, I was making tea when my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Garage camera. I opened the security app. At first, all I saw was someone standing near the detached garage. Then the porch light caught his face. Dad. I froze. He wasn't knocking. He wasn't calling my name. He kept looking around the property instead. Then he walked toward the side door of the garage. Something long was hanging from his hand. I zoomed in. It looked like a portable metal cutting tool. Carmen. She looked over from the dining table. What is it? I turned the phone toward her. She watched the recording twice. Call the sheriff. I don't want to overreact. You aren't. She pointed at the screen. He's already ignored the no trespassing notice. The responding deputy arrived before Dad left the property. By the time I stepped outside, Dad was insisting he'd only stopped by to talk. The deputy remained polite. Sir, you've previously been advised not to enter this property. I wasn't entering. You crossed the posted boundary. Dad sighed dramatically. My daughter won't even let me explain. I stayed quiet. There wasn't anything left to explain. The deputy issued him a formal trespass citation. Dad looked at me like I'd betrayed him. I looked back without saying a word. A few days passed without another visit. Then something unexpected arrived in the mail. A thick envelope. No return address. Inside was a photocopy of what looked like an old financial agreement. Highlighted across the top were the words, "Cabin down payment contribution." According to the document, Dad had supposedly helped fund my purchase years earlier. There were signatures, dates, bank references. At first glance, it looked convincing. I almost questioned my own memory. Almost. Then I remembered something. I hadn't even started looking for mountain property until less than a year ago. There couldn't have been a contribution years earlier. I drove straight to Carmen's office. She studied the paperwork carefully without saying much. Finally, she pushed the pages back across the desk. "This is an original. You think it's fake?" "I think it's been altered." She pointed to several tiny inconsistencies. The font spacing changed in different sections. The digital timestamp didn't match the document format. One signature had clearly been copied from another page. "This needs forensic review," she said. A document examiner later confirmed our suspicions. The file showed signs of digital modification. Someone had edited portions of it before printing. That changed everything. This was no longer just a disagreement over a cabin. There were now multiple allegations involving forged documents, unauthorized business activity, and possible identity misuse. I stopped waiting for someone in my family to admit the truth. If an apology had ever been coming, it would have happened long before forged paperwork started showing up in my mailbox. A week later, Carmen called just before noon. "They've scheduled the hearing." I looked out through the cabin windows at the quiet mountains surrounding my home. "When?" she answered without hesitation. "The court officially accepted the case this morning." The courtroom was quieter than I expected. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody made dramatic speeches. It turned out real legal disputes were nothing like family arguments. They revolved around documents, timelines, and evidence. Carmen organized everything into neat folders: the property deed, the business registration using my address, the vacation rental listing, the payment records, the security footage, the altered document that the forensic examiner had reviewed. The judge spent far more time reading than talking. Dad tried to explain that everything had been done for the family. He kept returning to the same idea. A child shouldn't shut their parents out. The judge nodded politely, then asked a simple question. "Did Ms. Parker ever authorize any of you to use her property for business purposes?" Silence. Evan shifted in his chair. "No." "Were you listed on the deed?" "No." The judge looked back at the paperwork. "Family relationships do not transfer ownership rights." That sentence was probably less than 10 words, but it ended months of arguing. The court confirmed that I was the sole legal owner of the cabin. My family was prohibited from using my address, photographs of the property, or the cabin itself for any commercial purpose. The investigation into the altered documents remained a separate matter. As for Summit Escape Ventures, it didn't survive. The booking platform permanently removed the listing. Customer deposits had to be refunded. Without the reservations, the business collapsed almost as quickly as it had appeared. I didn't celebrate. I honestly didn't feel like celebrating. It was just over. Walking out of the courthouse, Dad looked straight ahead without saying a word. Evan left through another exit. Mom paused beside me. "I wish things hadn't happened like this." "So do I." She nodded once before following Dad to the parking lot. That was all. No dramatic reconciliation, no sudden apology. Just two people who were too tired to keep arguing. Life slowly became quieter after that. I started taking consulting clients again, helping small businesses with marketing strategy from the cabin I'd worked so hard to buy. Most mornings began with coffee on the deck before opening my laptop. The silence that used to feel unfamiliar gradually became comforting. A few months later, a small package arrived in the mail. The handwriting on the label belonged to Mom. Inside was an old brass key. I recognized it immediately. My bedroom key. The one Dad had taken off my bedroom door when I was 16 because, according to him, kids don't need privacy. Folded beneath it was a single note. Only one sentence. Loving someone doesn't mean controlling their life. I'm sorry. I read it twice. Then I folded it again. I didn't call her that day. I wasn't ready. A week later, I sent a short text instead. Thank you for returning the key. She replied with a simple heart emoji. Nothing more. That was enough. We speak occasionally now, mostly birthdays, sometimes holidays. We don't pretend the past never happened, and we don't discuss my cabin unless I bring it up. Those boundaries aren't temporary anymore. They're part of our relationship. The old key now sits in the top drawer of my desk beside my work notebook. I don't keep it because I need it. The lock it belonged to is long gone. I keep it because it reminds me how different life feels when the door is finally mine to lock or to open. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's that kindness and generosity should never require giving up your right to make decisions about your own life. The people who truly care about you may not always agree with your boundaries, but they should be able to respect them. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to protect your own boundaries with family, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your story might remind someone else they're not alone. And if you enjoy real-life family drama stories like this, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Thanks so much for spending your time with me today. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next story.